The security camera captured everything. At 7:43 on a cold Monday morning, a tired single father named Daniel Carter stood outside a crowded downtown coffee shop with a worn brown purse in his hands. Inside that purse were thousands of dollars in cash, several credit cards, a passport, a diamond necklace, and something Daniel couldn't possibly have expected to find. But what happened next would change his life forever. Daniel had every reason to keep the purse. He was behind on rent. His 8-year-old daughter needed new school shoes. His old car was making a terrible noise every time he turned the key. And that morning, Daniel had exactly $11.40 in his checking account. Yet he walked back into the coffee shop and asked the cashier one question. "Excuse me, did anyone lose this?" What Daniel didn't know was that the woman who owned the purse was sitting in a private office upstairs, crying over the worst day of her life. And when she finally came downstairs and saw the man holding her purse, she didn't say thank you. She stared at him for several seconds and whispered 6 words that Daniel would never forget. "Why didn't you take the money?" Daniel had no answer. At least, not one she expected. And before this story reaches that shocking moment, if you believe that one honest decision can change a person's entire life, take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because Daniel's story isn't really about a lost purse. It's about what happens when someone chooses to do the right thing even when doing the wrong thing would be easier. Daniel Carter was 38 years old and had learned a long time ago that life didn't always reward good people. He lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of an aging brick building on the outskirts of Chicago. The heating system rattled at night, the kitchen window didn't close completely, and the elevator had been broken for almost 6 months. But Daniel didn't complain. He had learned that complaining didn't put food on the table. It didn't pay bills. It didn't make his daughter smile. And it certainly didn't bring his wife back. Every morning at 5:30, Daniel's alarm went off. He would quietly get out of bed so he wouldn't wake his daughter, walk into the kitchen, start the coffee maker, and stare at the bills taped to the refrigerator. Rent. Electricity. Car insurance. School expenses. Groceries. Medical bills. He had a system. If a bill wasn't absolutely necessary, it waited. If something broke, he tried to repair it himself. If his daughter wanted something, he tried to find a way. And if he wanted something, he simply didn't buy it. Daniel had once dreamed of owning a small construction company. Before becoming a father, he had worked as a supervisor for a large contracting company and earned enough to live comfortably. Then his wife, Emily, died unexpectedly. She had been 29. Their daughter, Sophie, was barely 3. One ordinary afternoon, Emily had complained about a headache. Daniel had told her to rest. She had smiled and said she'd be fine. She wasn't. By midnight, she was gone. A sudden brain aneurysm had taken her life before the doctors could save her. Daniel never forgot the sound of the doctor saying, "I'm sorry." He never forgot the hallway. He never forgot holding 3-year-old Sophie while trying to explain something he couldn't even understand himself. After Emily's death, Daniel stopped caring about climbing the corporate ladder. He took whatever work allowed him to be home for Sophie. Eventually, he became a maintenance supervisor at a small apartment complex. The salary wasn't impressive. The work was exhausting. But it came with predictable hours. And predictable hours meant he could take Sophie to school. He could attend parent-teacher meetings. He could be there when she was sick. To Daniel, that was wealth. His daughter was everything. Sophie was 8 now. She had brown hair, bright green eyes, and the habit of asking difficult questions at exactly the wrong time. That morning, she appeared in the kitchen wearing one sock. "Dad?" Daniel turned. "Yeah. Do I have to wear the blue shoes again?" Daniel looked at her feet. The blue shoes were almost a year old. The soles were beginning to separate. He smiled. They still work. Sophie looked down. They have a hole. Only a tiny one. My sock gets wet when it rains. Daniel's smile disappeared for half a second. Then he crouched beside her. I'll get you new ones. When? Soon. How soon? Daniel laughed softly. You've become very good at negotiations. Sophie smiled. I learned from you. Daniel kissed her forehead. Eat your breakfast. There was only one piece of toast left. Daniel pushed it toward her. She immediately pushed half back. We can share. Daniel shook his head. You need it more than I do. But you're hungry. I'm fine. Sophie narrowed her eyes. Dad. Daniel sighed. Okay. Half. They divided the toast. It wasn't much. But they laughed anyway. That was Daniel's secret. He couldn't give Sophie everything. So he tried to make what he could give her feel like everything. After dropping her at school, Daniel drove downtown for a repair job. His old silver sedan shook whenever it went above 50 miles per hour. He had been telling himself for months that he would fix it. He had been telling himself that about many things. The coffee shop was not part of his plan. He only stopped because his client had canceled the appointment. Daniel parked near a small cafe called Morning Harbor. He had $11.40 in his account, but he still allowed himself one coffee. It was a little luxury he rarely permitted. He walked inside. The cafe was crowded. People were rushing to work. Phones were ringing. Baristas were calling out orders. Daniel ordered the cheapest coffee and stood near the window. Then he noticed the purse. It was lying underneath a chair. Brown leather. Expensive. Daniel looked around. Nobody seemed to notice it. He picked it up. At first, he intended to hand it to the cashier. But then he saw a business card sticking out of one pocket. The name read, Victoria Bennett. Daniel had heard that name before. Everyone in the city had. Victoria Bennett was the founder and CEO of Bennett Development Group, a company that owned hotels, apartment buildings, commercial properties, and several major construction projects. She was wealthy. Extremely wealthy. Daniel opened the purse only enough to find identification. He immediately saw several credit cards. A passport. Cash. A diamond necklace. Then something else. A photograph. Victoria Bennett stood beside an older woman. The woman looked sick. On the back of the photograph were 4 words. Mom. Don't give up. Daniel stared at the photograph for a moment. Then he closed the purse. He walked to the counter. Someone lost this. The cashier looked at the purse. Her eyes widened. Oh my God. Do you know whose it is? No. Can you keep it here? The cashier hesitated. Sir, I think you should wait. Why? Because that looks very expensive. Daniel smiled. I noticed. The cashier called the manager. While they were discussing what to do, Daniel glanced toward the staircase leading upstairs. The cafe had private offices above it. Then he heard shouting. A woman's voice. No. I already told you. I need another hour. Daniel froze. The voice sounded familiar. A moment later, a woman hurried down the stairs. She was dressed in an elegant black coat. Her hair was pulled back. Her face was pale. She looked exhausted. Then she saw the purse. She stopped. Her eyes moved from the purse to Daniel. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then she walked slowly toward him. My purse. Daniel held it out. I think this is yours. Victoria Bennett took it. She opened it. Everything was there. Her money. Her cards. Her passport. The necklace. The photograph. She looked at Daniel. And instead of smiling, she asked, "Why didn't you take the money?" The cafe became strangely quiet. Daniel frowned. "Excuse me? There was cash in here." "I know. Thousands of dollars. I saw it. You could have taken it." Daniel shrugged. "I could have. Why didn't you?" Daniel looked at the photograph in her hand. Then he looked at Victoria. "My daughter was taught that if something belongs to someone else, you return it." Victoria stared at him. "That's all? That's enough." Something changed in Victoria's face. She looked down at the photograph. Her eyes became wet. Daniel didn't know what he had interrupted. He only knew the woman in front of him looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. "Thank you," she whispered. Daniel nodded. Then he turned to leave. "Wait." He stopped. Victoria reached into the purse. She pulled out several $100 bills. "Please." Daniel shook his head. "No. It's a reward." "I don't want it." "Why?" "Because then it wouldn't feel like returning something. It would feel like selling honesty." Victoria stared at him. Daniel walked away. He had no idea that his decision had just been witnessed by someone else. A man in an expensive gray suit stood at the top of the stairs. His name was Richard Blake. He was Victoria's chief financial officer. And he had been watching Daniel carefully. Richard's expression was not admiration. It was suspicion. Because Richard knew something Daniel didn't. Victoria Bennett wasn't just having a bad morning. Her company was in serious trouble. And the missing purse contained the only documents that could prove it. For the last 6 months, someone inside Bennett Development Group had been secretly moving money through shell companies. Millions of dollars had disappeared. Victoria had spent weeks trying to discover who was responsible. That morning, she had finally found evidence. The evidence was in her purse. And someone had tried to steal it. Victoria believed the purse had been deliberately planted in the cafe. She just didn't know who had done it. Daniel's decision to return it had unknowingly placed him in the middle of a dangerous situation. But he knew none of that. He drove home. On the way, his car made the same terrible grinding noise. He ignored it. At home, he opened the refrigerator. There was half a carton of milk. 2 eggs. A little cheese. He sighed. Then he noticed a letter on the table. Final notice. Daniel closed his eyes. Rent was due in 4 days. He was short by $680. He sat down. For the first time that day, the weight became too much. He put his face in his hands. Then he heard the front door open. "Dad!" Sophie ran inside. Daniel quickly wiped his eyes. "Hey, kiddo." She dropped her backpack. "Guess what?" "What?" "I got selected for the science competition." Daniel smiled. "That's amazing. And we have to build a model." "Okay. And it needs special materials." Daniel's smile weakened. "How much?" $25. He looked at her. She immediately understood. "We don't have to do it." Daniel shook his head. "No. Dad. We're doing it. But you're going to build your model." She smiled. "Really? Really?" She hugged him. Daniel closed his eyes. $25 wasn't much. But that week, it felt enormous. That night, Daniel worked on the model with Sophie at the kitchen table. They used cardboard from an old package. Bottle caps. Paper. Glue. Sophie wanted to build a model of a solar-powered house. Daniel helped her cut the pieces. Around midnight, Sophie fell asleep. Daniel carried her to bed. Then he returned to the kitchen. He looked at the bills. He looked at the model. He looked at the photograph of Emily sitting on the refrigerator. "I don't know how long I can keep doing this," he whispered. The next morning, something unexpected happened. Someone knocked on his apartment door. Daniel opened it. Victoria Bennett stood in the hallway. She was wearing a simple coat. No security team. No expensive entourage. Just her. Daniel stared. "How did you find me?" Victoria smiled faintly. "I had your name from the cafe's security footage." Daniel became uncomfortable. "Why are you here?" "I wanted to thank you properly." "You already did." "No. I didn't." She held out an envelope. Daniel didn't take it. "What is that?" "A job offer." He looked confused. "What kind of job?" "Construction operations manager." Daniel laughed. "You don't know me." "I know enough." "You don't even know what I do." "I had your employment history checked." Daniel's expression hardened. "You checked my background?" "Yes." "Without asking?" "I needed to know who you were." "Why?" Victoria hesitated. "Because someone is trying to destroy my company." Daniel stared at her. "I think you have the wrong person." "I don't." She opened the envelope. Inside was a formal offer. Salary, $115,000 per year. Daniel stared at the number. He hadn't made anywhere near that amount in years. He looked up. "Why me?" "Because I need someone I can trust." "You don't know if you can trust me." "I know you had the opportunity to steal from me and didn't. That doesn't qualify me to run your company. Your employment record says otherwise." Daniel looked away. "I can't leave my daughter." "You won't have to." "What does that mean?" "Your position would have flexible hours. You'd have a company vehicle. Your daughter could attend the private school connected to our foundation." Daniel immediately shook his head. "No." Victoria looked surprised. "Why?" "Because I don't want charity." "This isn't charity." "It feels like it." "I am offering you a job." Daniel looked at her. "Why does it feel like you are trying to save me?" Victoria's face changed. For a moment, she looked less like a billionaire CEO and more like a frightened daughter. "Because someone once saved me." Daniel waited. "My mother." She held up the photograph. "She raised me alone after my father left. We had nothing. She worked 3 jobs. She taught me that dignity was more valuable than money." Her voice cracked. "She's sick now." Daniel understood. "That's why you were crying upstairs." Victoria nodded. "She has cancer." Daniel said nothing. "I've spent my whole life building this company because I promised her I'd give her a life where she never had to worry about money again.